The Dragon Empress was a name spoken in careful whispers across 1,000 worlds. Children were taught never to say it loudly. Soldiers trembled when her shadow passed over their ships. Entire governments changed their laws just to avoid offending her. She was power, fire, and judgment in one massive form. Her wings could block out a city. Her roar could break the shields of war cruisers. Her fire could turn a mountain into a puddle of glowing stone. But even the strongest beings in the universe have moments they hide. On this day, the palace felt wrong. Too quiet. Too heavy. Something was different. The air itself tasted like fear. The guards standing outside the throne hall felt it before anyone else. Their armor buzzed, reacting to a force none of them dared name. Inside the hall, the Dragon Empress stood perfectly still. The throne hall was a giant chamber carved from star-forged stone. It stretched so far that people felt small even before they looked at her. Dragons from her ancient bloodline were carved into the walls, their glowing eyes watching everything. The ceiling shimmered with high heat, warping the air. The floor was strong enough to hold battleships. Yet the Empress's claws were slowly digging into it. Her wings were held tight. Against her body, her breathing was heavy, and her head was lowered. Nobody ever saw her bow her head. Then it happened. Golden tear rolled down her huge cheek, slid along the crack between her scales, and fell to the floor. When it hit, the sound was like a star collapsing in slow motion. A deep, echoing boom filled the hall and rattled every pillar. The tear didn't splatter like water. It struck the stone and burned a glowing mark into it, smoke rising as if the floor itself was crying. Everyone in the palace felt the tremor. Servants froze mid-step. Guards stumbled. Advisors gasped. It was not pain, not anger, but something worse. It was grief. The Dragon Empress was crying. The news spread through the palace in seconds. Her Majesty has shed a tear. A guard whispered in terror, "Stay clear of the hall." Another officer shouted, "Her grief is dangerous." Messages spread across her empire almost instantly. One warning was repeated in every language: the Empress is grieving. Stay away, do not disturb her. Ships paused their travel. Worlds shut down their communication lines. Leaders canceled meetings and ran emergency protocols. Everyone feared that one more tear might unleash unstoppable destruction. Nobody wanted to be near her. Nobody wanted to see the Empress in pain. Nobody. Except one human janitor pushing a cleaning cart on the far side of the palace. His name was Evan Cole. People rarely noticed him. He wore simple gray coveralls, carried a mop, and cleaned floors that diplomats never looked at. He was not a warrior, not a noble, not a trained negotiator. He was just a human with quiet eyes and tired hands. He felt the tremor under his boots, saw the lights flicker for a moment, and heard the distant echo that shook the palace. Most workers ran. Evan didn't. He wasn't brave, not really. He didn't think of himself as a hero. He just felt something pull at his heart. A sound like someone trying to breathe through pain. A sound he had heard before on Earth, in hospitals, at funerals. In lonely homes, someone was hurting. That was enough for him. He left his cleaning cart behind, stepped away from the path he was supposed to follow, and walked toward the throne hall. His steps were slow but steady. Every instinct told him to turn back. The guards shouted at him from a distance, warning him to stay away. "No one enters," they yelled. "It's too dangerous." But Evan kept walking. The giant doors of the throne hall were half open. A wave of heat rolled out, pushing against him like a heavy wind. The smell of burning stone filled the air. He swallowed, wiped sweat from his forehead, and stepped inside. The hall was enormous. His footsteps echoed softly as he walked across the glowing floor. The pillars towered above him like guardians from another age, and then he saw her, the Dragon Empress. Her scales glowed like hot sapphire metal. Her eyes were closed. Her tail coiled around her like a fallen mountain. She looked smaller only because she was hurting so deeply. Another tear slipped free. Evan froze. His heart thumped hard in his chest, but he didn't run. He whispered to himself, "She's crying. She's really crying." The universe feared her. Worlds hid from her. Even her own guards avoided the hall. But Evan took one more step, because pain, no matter where it lived, even in a creature of fire and stars, was still pain. And nobody should face it alone. Evan stepped carefully into the throne hall. Every muscle in his body wanted to turn and run. The heat pressed against his skin like the universe itself was warning him to leave. The stone beneath his boots seemed alive, humming softly with the Empress's grief. He could hear it, the tiny crackle of her scales as she trembled. the quiet hiss of fire escaping her nostrils. It was terrifying, yet something stronger than fear kept him moving forward. Curiosity? Compassion? Maybe both. He didn't know. He only knew one thing. She was alone, and she was hurting. And nobody should be alone in pain. The Empress didn't open her eyes. Her massive body shook slightly with every breath, as if holding herself upright was a struggle. The golden tear from before had left a glowing scar on the stone floor. Another one formed, sliding slowly down her cheek, sizzling the air as it fell. Evan swallowed hard. He was just a human. A janitor. A small, ordinary creature in a universe filled with gods and monsters. Nothing he did could compare to her power. He could be crushed by one careless swipe of her claw. One wrong movement, and he would burn in fire before he could even blink. But still, he stepped closer. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. His voice was trembling, just a little. He had no idea if she could hear him. The Empress's eye flicked open. It was enormous, golden, with a swirl of fire inside it. She looked down at him like she was staring at an ant. The heat from her body washed over him, intense and unbearable. Her voice came, soft but sharp, a sound that could break mountains. "You should run, human." Evan's heart pounded. His voice caught in his throat. I can't," he said. "You're hurting." Her laugh was low, almost a rumble of thunder. But it had no humor. "Hurting? You think you understand what it means to hurt? I am the Dragon Empress. I have ruled galaxies, commanded armies, destroyed entire planets. Do you think a human janitor knows what grief is?" Evan took another step closer. His hands shook. His heart was loud in his chest. I know what it feels like to lose someone," he said. "Even if I'm small. Even if I can't fight the universe. I know it hurts to be alone." The Empress studied him for a long moment. Her massive head tilted slightly. Her wings twitched, the edges brushing the stone like dark smoke. The silence in the hall was almost unbearable. Then she spoke again, quieter this time. "My mate, he returned to the stars today. He died defending a world that despised him, a world that feared me. And now I am left alone. Do you understand that? Do you understand the weight of a grief that spans centuries?" Evan nodded slowly. His throat was tight. "I can't feel all that," he admitted. "I don't have centuries. I can't carry worlds. But I do know this. Nobody should face pain alone." The Empress's eye softened, just a little. She lowered her head slightly, so that her massive snout was near him. The heat from her scales was overwhelming. It burned, but Evan stayed where he was. His courage was not from strength or size, it was from heart. From empathy. "You are small," she said, her voice trembling. "Fragile. You could be crushed in an instant. Yet you remain." Evan swallowed. "I'm not brave," he said honestly. "I'm just human. I do what I can. That's all." The Empress didn't respond immediately. She let the silence stretch, her golden eye watching him. The fire in her gaze flickered, uncertainty showing for the first time in centuries. And then, another tear fell. Evan stepped forward again, slow, careful, but he didn't stop. He lowered his hand, shaking slightly, and touched her claw. It was massive. It was sharp. It was fire. And it was warm. She flinched, a huge, trembling mountain flinched at a touch of flesh. "You comfort a creature who could destroy you in a heartbeat," she said softly. "Why?" Evan looked up at her. "Because nobody should cry alone," he said. His voice was steady now. "No matter how strong they are. No matter how scary." The Empress's eyes filled with flames, then tears, then something he didn't expect. Hesitation. Centuries of power, wisdom, and pride. Melting into uncertainty before a human janitor. And in that moment, Evan realized, sometimes, the smallest hearts carry the heaviest courage. The Dragon Empress stayed still. Her massive head lowered, her golden eyes locked on Evan. The silence in the throne hall was heavy. Almost unbearable, but not with fear this time. It was quiet with a fragile kind of hope. The air shimmered with heat and sorrow, and every crack in the star-forged stone seemed to hum with the Empress's grief. Evan did not move his hand from her claw. He could feel the tiny tremors of her body beneath his palm, the barely controlled strength coiled in every scale. One wrong move could crush him instantly. One wrong thought, one wrong word, and he could ignite the firestorm of her rage. And yet he stayed. I don't know how to fix it," Evan said softly, voice shaking, but I can stay. I can be here. You don't have to be alone. The Empress's eyes widened slightly, the fire inside them flickering like it had never flickered before. A creature that had stood for centuries, that had ruled galaxies with an iron claw, that had destroyed anyone who dared oppose her. She hesitated. Her voice was low, almost broken. My mate, my companion. He fought for a world that feared us both. He died today. And all the stars I have conquered, all the empires I have built, all the worlds I have ruled, they are nothing to me without him. Evan's chest tightened. He understood loss. He had lost friends, family, people he loved. He had never faced centuries of grief, but he had faced enough pain to know the hollow ache of emptiness. The silent scream that comes from being alone in sorrow. I'm sorry, he said. Quietly, I really am. The Empress shifted slightly, the tip of her tail scraping the floor with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. She sniffed, a tiny wisp of smoke escaping her nostrils, and the heat in the room grew heavier. Why? Why do you stay? She asked, her voice trembling. Why do you risk yourself for a being you do not even know? My fire could burn you to ash. My claws could crush you. My grief could destroy entire worlds. And you remain. Evan swallowed hard. Because it's wrong to leave someone hurting alone. Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter how powerful. Doesn't matter if I might get hurt. Nobody should have to face that alone. The Empress closed her eyes, and a low rumble of sorrow rolled through her chest. She had never been spoken to like this, not with respect, not with honesty, not with pure human compassion. The worlds had always obeyed her out of fear. Diplomats had always flattered her, soldiers had always cowered, and advisors had always planned their own survival first. But this human, he didn't fear her, he didn't beg, he didn't try to impress her, he just cared. Another tear fell, sliding down her scales, sizzling the floor beneath. The Empress's enormous shoulders shook with the weight of centuries of sorrow, the weight of a love lost, the weight of endless solitude. And still, Evan stayed. I can't take your pain away, he said quietly. But I can sit with it. I can share it. I don't know how else to help. The Empress tilted her head, her huge eye glimmering with something new. Curiosity, surprise, maybe even trust. Share it? She whispered. Share the grief of a dragon? With a human? Yes, Evan said. Even if it's just sitting here. Even if all I do is not leave. Sometimes. That's enough. The Empress stared at him, and for a long moment, the centuries of her life, the battles, the conquests, the fear she inspired seemed to vanish. She was just a dragon. Just a creature in pain. Just a being who needed someone beside her. And in that moment, Evan realized something. The universe had forgotten what it meant to care. The universe had turned away from grief, hiding behind fear and rules and distance. But here, in this empty throne hall, with golden fire in her eyes and sorrow in her heart, he could do what no one else had dared. He could care. The Empress's wings twitched. Tiny sparks of fire flickering along the edges. She inhaled a deep, shuddering breath, and the room seemed to pulse with life. The tear-streaked scales glimmered in the light. Her gaze softened, just a fraction, and for the first time in centuries, she let herself be seen, not as a ruler, not as a god, not as a weapon, but as a grieving soul. Evan did not speak. He simply remained, hand on her claw, heart full of quiet courage, waiting, watching, and being present. The universe outside waited, of course. Worlds would fear the Empress, fleets would hover in orbit, advisors would panic. They expected fire, destruction, rage. They expected ruin. But inside the hall, the universe was quiet, because for the first time in countless years, the Dragon Empress was not alone. Outside the throne hall, the universe held its breath. Entire fleets hovered silently above her palace world. Engines dimmed, weapons powered down, waiting for the inevitable storm. Worlds that had once bowed before the Dragon Empress now trembled in fear, thinking that her grief could spill across galaxies like wildfire. Every leader, every diplomat, every soldier assumed the same thing. If the Dragon Empress cried, the universe would burn. Inside the palace, advisors whispered frantically behind layers of reinforced doors. Send in the elite guards. One barked. Evacuate the hall. She is too dangerous. Another shook his head, voice trembling. She has lost control. Do you not feel it? The heat, the power. Anyone who enters will die. But Evan did not move. He had entered the hall hours ago, and he had not left. He sat on the cold stone floor, leaning slightly against the Empress's massive claw. His hand rested there lightly, almost reverently, and every tiny vibration of her immense body passed through him. He could feel her grief. He could feel the centuries of loss and pain burning inside her. And he stayed. The Empress's head remained low, her golden eyes shimmering with tears. She did not roar. She did not lash out. She did not use her fire or her claws to send him away. Instead, she simply breathed long, shuddering breaths that carried the weight of worlds she had lost and battles she had fought. "Why are you still here?" she asked softly, the question almost a whisper. It was so quiet that Evan had to strain to hear it over the hum of heat and the subtle vibration of her wings. "You should leave. All others have left. They knew better. You are small. You are fragile. You could be destroyed in an instant." Evan shook his head, his voice steady now. "I told you. Nobody should cry alone. Doesn't matter how big you are, doesn't matter how powerful. Nobody should be alone in pain. Not even you." The Empress studied him in silence. Her enormous head tilted slightly, her wings twitching in ways that made the stone floor shiver. Sparks flickered along her scales as she exhaled slowly. The halls, once silent except for the echoes of her grief, now felt alive, almost tender. Outside, the waiting fleets could sense something was wrong. Their sensors registered abnormal heat, abnormal energy, but no destruction. No fires, no explosions. They waited, tense and terrified. They expected a storm, a hurricane of fire and fury. They did not expect patience. And inside the hall, patience was all Evan had to give. The Empress's eyes, enormous and bright, softened further. Another tear slid down her cheek, landing on the stone floor with a sizzling hiss. Evan reached out, almost instinctively, and touched the tip of her claw again. The heat was intense, almost unbearable. But he did not flinch. "Your worlds are waiting," she said finally, her voice trembling. "They fear me. They will not understand. They will not comprehend why you remain." "I don't care," Evan replied simply. "I am not their worlds. I am not a soldier. I am not a ruler. I am just a human. And I am here. That's enough." For the first time in centuries, the Dragon Empress let herself feel something other than grief and anger. It was subtle at first, a flicker of curiosity, maybe even hope. She lowered her massive head a little closer to him, and the heat that rolled out was no longer threatening. It was gentle, almost like the warmth of a sun rising after a long, cold night. "You are brave," she said, "and foolish, and yet I sense truth in your heart. You do not fear me. You do not bow. You do not run. You simply stay." Evan shrugged, trying to hide the trembling in his hands. "I'm not brave," he said. "I'm just human. I know what it feels like to be hurt, to lose someone, to feel helpless. And sometimes, you just sit there and try to be there for someone. That's all I can do." The Empress exhaled a long, trembling breath. Her wings shifted, stretching slightly, casting enormous shadows across the hall. Sparks flickered along her scales, but they did not strike. The halls stayed intact. Outside, the universe waited for fire. But none came. And in that silence, a quiet truth formed. Sometimes, the smallest hearts carry the heaviest courage. Sometimes, the universe expects destruction, and instead finds care. The Dragon Empress looked down at Evan, her golden eyes reflecting his small, tired form. She said nothing more for a long moment, just breathed, just allowed herself to exist without judgment or fury. And in that moment, the worlds outside learned something new. Fear is not the only path. Compassion, patience, and courage, even from the smallest of creatures, can calm storms that no fleet, no weapon, no empire ever could. Evan remained seated beside her, quiet, steady, and unwavering. He did not need words. His presence was enough. The throne hall was silent except for the quiet crackle of heat rolling off the Dragon Empress. Her massive body shook slightly, not with anger, but with the weight of grief. Every scale gleamed with fire. Every breath rippled the air like molten metal, and yet she did not strike. She did not roar. She did not crush. She only endured. Evan remained seated on the stone floor, leaning slightly against her claw. His hands rested on the edges of her scales, trembling slightly from the heat, but he did not pull away. He could feel her heartbeat beneath his palm, slow and heavy, yet powerful enough to shake the ground. One wrong move could flatten him. One wrong breath could ignite her fury, and still he stayed. The Empress let out a shuddering breath, smoke curling from her nostrils. "You do not understand," she said quietly, her golden eyes locking onto him. "I have lost him. My companion, my mate, my other half. He is gone, all the centuries. We shared all the battles we fought, all the worlds we protected. And now he is nothing but dust among the stars." Evan swallowed hard, his throat was tight. He had felt loss before. He had cried for friends, for family, for people he loved. But this was grief that stretched across centuries, grief that had the power to melt worlds, grief that could break empires. And yet, he did not flinch. "I can't bring him back," he said softly. "I know that. I can't fix what's gone. But I can stay with you. I can share this moment. You don't have to face it alone." The Empress's massive head lowered closer to him, her golden eyes wide with disbelief. "Share my grief?" she whispered, almost in shock. "You are small, fragile, a human. You could burn in an instant. You could be crushed. You could be gone before a heartbeat passes. And still, you speak like this?" "Yes," Evan said. "Because nobody should cry alone. Doesn't matter who they are, or how powerful. Everyone deserves someone who stays, even you." The Empress blinked slowly. Another tear slid down her cheek, leaving a sizzling streak on the stone floor. Her tail twitched, her wings fluttered, and the hall seemed to tremble under the weight of her sorrow. Evan moved a little closer, his hand rested firmly against her claw. The heat was almost unbearable, burning through his coveralls, searing his skin beneath, yet he did not move. He did not hesitate. He did not fear. His small human courage shone brighter than any star in the room. "You comfort a being who could destroy you with a single thought," she said quietly, her voice almost a growl. "Explain this. Why do you stay?" Evan looked up at her, his face calm, his eyes steady. "Because it's right. Because it's human. Because it's the only thing I know how to do. You are in pain, and I can't fix it. But I can be here. That's all." The Empress stared at him for a long moment. The golden fire in her eyes flickered, uncertainty warring with centuries of pride. She had commanded fleets, ruled worlds, destroyed empires, and yet, here was a human who dared to remain in her presence, who dared to see her pain without running, without begging, without fear. Another tear fell, sizzling the floor. This time, Evan didn't flinch. He placed his other hand on her claw, feeling the heat, the power, the grief that had toppled civilizations. "You are not like the others," she whispered. "You are small, fragile, yet your heart is strong. Stronger than armies, stronger than fleets, stronger than the fear that controls the universe." Evan shrugged lightly. "I'm just human," he said. "Being small doesn't mean you can't do something right. Being afraid doesn't mean you leave someone behind." The Empress exhaled, a long shuddering breath that rocked the hall. She lowered her head almost to the floor, brushing her massive snout against him lightly. The heat was intense, but it was no longer threatening. It was warm, gentle, almost like the first sun of morning after a long, cold night. And in that moment, centuries of grief seemed to shift. Pain and sorrow did not vanish, but they softened. They did not destroy, but they allowed a space for something new. "Stay," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do not leave. Sit with me, if you can endure it." Evan nodded. "I'll stay," he said. "I'll stay as long as you need." For the first time in countless years, the Dragon Empress let herself lean into someone's presence, let herself be vulnerable without the shield of fear or power. She did not roar. She did not burn. She did not lash out. She simply allowed herself to feel, and for the first time, she did not feel alone. Outside the palace, worlds waited, expecting a storm. Fleets prepared for war. Advisors feared the worst. And inside the throne hall, a single human janitor sat beside the Dragon Empress, calm, steadfast, unwavering. And that was enough to change everything. The universe waited. Outside the palace, entire star systems paused in anticipation. Fleets hovered silently above the Dragon Empress's world, engines humming like anxious hearts. Worlds had sent warnings, advisories, evacuations. Every living being that knew her power expected fire, fury, and ruin. They believed her grief would explode like a supernova, consuming everything nearby. Inside, however, nothing of the sort happened. The throne hall was vast, stretching farther than the eye could see. Pillars carved with dragons of her ancient bloodline rose toward the ceiling, and the heat shimmered, bending the air like liquid gold. But the hall remained intact. The massive doors had been left open, and yet no one entered or disturbed the silence. Only one human remained. Evan Cole. He sat beside the Dragon Empress, steady, calm, unwavering. His hands rested lightly on her colossal claw, feeling every subtle tremor. He did not speak unless necessary. He did not move unless asked. He simply existed in the same space, a presence strong enough to anchor a creature who could crush galaxies. The Empress's head rested near him, her golden eyes flickering with heat and sorrow. Her breathing was heavy, her wings folded tight against her back. Sparks of fire danced along her scales, but none of it leaped, none of it harmed him. She was immense, terrifying, unstoppable. And yet she stayed quiet. Hours passed. Outside, the universe still waited for disaster. The fleets tensed, weapons ready, expecting destruction to roll outward. Worlds braced themselves, preparing for emergency evacuations. They feared the inevitable storm, but the storm never came. Inside, Evan spoke softly, almost whispering. "It's okay to cry," he said. "It doesn't make you weak. It just makes you alive." The Empress tilted her massive head slightly, letting him see the tears glinting like molten gold along her cheek. "I have ruled for centuries," she said. "I have commanded fleets, destroyed empires, and brought entire worlds to their knees. And yet, I feel helpless now." "You're not helpless," Evan said. "You're grieving. That's different. It's human, or it's living. Everyone hurts sometimes. Even you." Her wings shivered at his words. The hall seemed to hum with the unspoken truth. Fear had always been her shield. Power had always been her weapon. And now, for the first time in centuries, none of it was needed. Evan moved a little closer, careful not to touch too much, careful not to startle her. "You don't have to face it alone," he said quietly. "I can stay, that's enough, right?" The Empress exhaled, smoke curling from her nostrils. She lowered her head until it nearly brushed the floor beside him. Sparks ran along her scales, but instead of fear, Evan felt warmth. Gentle, steady warmth, like a sun slowly rising after a long night. "You stay," she said at last, her voice trembling. "When all worlds feared me, when all worlds stayed away, you stayed." "Yes," Evan said softly. "Because leaving someone alone when they hurt, that's worse than fear, that's loneliness. And nobody should be alone." For the first time, the Dragon Empress felt the weight of her grief shift. Pain remained, deep and heavy, but it was no longer consuming her. Rage, fury, destruction, all those feelings that had ruled her for centuries, had no place here. Only presence. Only someone willing to be with her through the worst moment of her life. She lowered her massive wings slightly, allowing the heat to wash over him without threat. She leaned her colossal head against the floor, her snout almost touching Evan's shoulder. Sparks flickered along her scales, but they did not leap. The stone beneath her claw glowed faintly, marking the place where grief met courage. Evan didn't speak. He simply sat, steady, calm, patient. His presence, small and human, anchored a creature who had ruled empires and galaxies alike. And in that stillness, something miraculous happened. The Dragon Empress breathed without trembling. Outside, the fleets and worlds waited for fire. They expected chaos. They expected death. But none of it came. Inside, a human janitor sat beside a Dragon Empress who had ruled the stars for centuries. He was small, fragile, ordinary, and yet his courage had calmed a storm that the universe had feared for ages. For the first time, the Empress understood something she had never known. Presence, compassion, and courage, even from the smallest heart, could hold more power than fleets, more force than fire, and more strength than fear itself. And in that quiet, impossibly still throne hall, the universe learned a new truth. Storms do not always arrive as expected. Sometimes they are tamed by the smallest and simplest of acts like staying. The Dragon Empress did not roar. She did not burn. She did not lash out. She only allowed herself to exist. And Evan, he allowed himself to stay. The storm had been stopped not by power, not by fire, not by fleets, but by humanity.